Medical professionals. What's the best reaction you've seen from a dad during the birth of his child?
I've been told that my dad's response to my entering this world was, "It's a person."
I was born in the 80s and the ultrasound technology wasn't that great. What my parents didn't know was that instead of one baby, there were two. Our hearts were beating at the same time and they could never really tell the gender, so they thought it was just one baby. So I came out. Then my mum says, "Doc, I still feel pain." And he looks and says, "I see another head." Apparently my father said, "What the frick? Whose baby is that?" And then my sister popped out. They were obviously floored. When I was born, my dad pulled out a Sharpie and drew a star at the bottom of my foot, to make sure they didn't lose me.
Fun fact, if you do that to a premature baby, it can leave a permanent tattoo, because the skin isn't done yet. The more you know.
So if I wrote "Made in China" on a preemie baby's foot. I was a C-section baby. A couple of years ago, the topic came up with my parents while drinking. I mentioned that this sounds kind of gross. My father looks me right in the eye and says, "Have you ever seen Alien? It was just like that."
I've seriously threatened my wife with watching the Alien trilogy while she was pregnant. I almost passed out at the first C-section.
We named our eldest daughter Ripley as her ultrasound photo made it look like she would emerge teeth and claws flailing. When I was born, my father, who's a gynecologist himself, came from watching me do my big entrance, or exit depending on how you look at it, and said to my mum, "You're not gonna believe what you just did." I was over 10 pounds at birth. For some reason, when they mentioned that their father was a gynecologist, I imagined him holding up a judge's number rating once the baby came on out of there. I don't know why, other than that his job would make him maybe a little more detached from the emotion of it all. Some more comments to follow.
My uncle was 13 pounds when he was born in the late 1930s. My grandmother was 5'1" tall and he was her first child. That woman had a uterus and a hoo-ha of steel. No other explanation. Apparently she couldn't feel her legs properly for about 3 months afterwards.
I was 11 pounds even. My mom came so close to breaking my dad's arm, they gave her a rolled-up blanket to squeeze instead. Luckily, I was a pretty quick birth, 5 hours, I believe. My dad went to the hospital to visit me and my mum at the time. After hearing a baby's screams so loud you could hear it in the elevator, he turns to the nurse with a silly grin on his face and tells her, "Well, this one has quite the vocal cords. I'm feeling sorry for his parents already." She turns to him and tells him, trying not to laugh,
"You're telling me, it's yours."
My dad missed my birth because he was choking on a sandwich.
Like he was super excited and choked, or just an unfortunate coincidence?
My dad missed my birth because he was buying a lottery ticket one state over. My parents weren't married and I was unplanned, and if my mum is telling the truth, he didn't want me at first and had wanted her to get a termination. It was only until after he held me for the first time that he realized he wanted me. And he's been a very good dad, thankfully. A story comes to mind of a friend who, when his son was born, just started crying hysterically and hugged everyone. The doctor, nurses, he even ran out into the hallway and hugged people visiting other patients. Always makes me smile when I think of it. My friend told me his story. He was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. So he was a little purple when he was born. His mum couldn't see what he looked like. His dad told her, "He looks like a California raisin." I actually had the reverse problem. I was hyperoxygenated and was red. My dad actually said, "Put this one back, she's not done yet."
My husband coddled our first son because I wanted him to have something with his son I could never have. I saw him holding this red, wrinkly, swaddled little baby and said, "Oh, look, they dressed up a potato like Mother Teresa."
My dad is a carpenter and was at work when he was told that my mum was in labor with me. His reaction? He went into a shocked stupor and accidentally shot his thumb with a nail gun. And that's the story of why my then 11-year-old sister had to fill out my birth certificate.
Did she get to name you too?
Be honest, is your name Poohface on your birth certificate?
My friend got to name his little brother, named him Leonardo after a Ninja Turtle.
My birth was both a terrifying and wonderful day at the same time. My mother hemorrhaged pretty badly, so my dad had this turbulent hour in which he was both crying with joy over the birth of his first child and also with terror at the thought of losing his wife. The doctors wouldn't let him back in the room while they were trying to save my mum's life. So apparently for this hour, all he did was pace the hallways outside the room holding me, and refusing to let anyone else near me, as if he was already preparing for it to just be me and him. My dad has never stopped being an utterly devoted and emotional father. To all those who asked, yes, my mother survived. At a forceps delivery last night, the dad-to-be was so horrified and impressed by the amount of pain his wife had gone through during her labor that he phoned up his own mum to say, "Thanks." I'm afraid to ask. Forceps delivery? Baby won't come out easily from the birth canal, so the doctor grabs its head with forceps and helps out. Usually leaves little dents because the baby's head is soft, but those straighten out afterwards. Note, usually straighten out afterwards. Multiple Redditors still retain scars and elongated heads. Thanks for the nightmares, guys. I think I finally decided to never give birth. When I was born after 13 hours of labor, my dad looked at my full head of black hair and blue eyes, looked at my mum and said, "Are you sure she's mine?" My grandfather was the one the nurses let carry me back to my room post-cleanup, and when my mum asked if I was okay, he said, "Yeah, I don't think the extra 2 toes will be a big hindrance," which led to my mum frantically tearing the blankets off to check my toes. Basically, the men in my family are buttholes. My brother was born about a year after me, and my mother had gone into false labor so many times that she only knew she was really in labor when she couldn't sleep that night. Anyways, later at the hospital, the doctor said that she was going to be in labor for a lot longer. So he went and ate dinner. She wasn't in labor for much longer. My grandmother delivered the kid and was holding him when a nurse walks by and says, "You can't do that." My grandmother retorts with, "Well, I'm not going to put it back." That doesn't sound like a very good nurse to me. No, that doesn't sound like a very good nurse. What did she think the grandmother was going to do? I imagine there was a fair bit of shock involved with realizing that a patient's family had delivered the baby instead of the hospital, but still. My father, up until I was born, had not seen a newborn baby, like ever. Naturally, he assumed that all babies look like they do in movies or commercials. As you can imagine, he was quite disappointed when an alien-looking thing is handed to him and introduced to him as his daughter. He handed me back to the doctors and went outside for a smoke to calculate how much all of the plastic surgeries were going to cost. Newborn babies are kind of gross looking, sticky and covered in baby cheese. Baby cheese? Well, now I'm not finishing the rest of my sub, thanks. My own husband, during my first C-section, the doctor asks if he wants to look over the curtain at the baby being delivered. He looks over, looks back with a look of horror. "What's wrong?" "Your insides are on your outsides." I will never forget the look on his face or the sound of his voice. "They're ripping you apart," is what my husband said in that exact situation. "They're tearing you apart, Lisa." When my mum gave birth via C-section to my brothers and I, triplets, the doctor asked my dad if he was okay watching the operation. My dad's response, "Oh yeah, it just looks like you're gutting a deer." My mum watched the second C-section, my husband had watched the first, and it fully satisfied his curiosity about where babies come from. She told me later that they hauled everything out, cut out the baby, then according to her, they stuffed you like a turkey to put everything back in. When I was born, they took me off immediately to clean me, take my footprints, bundled me up, and whatnot. I guess the 2 nurses were in a bit of a hurry and were doing both at the same time, and I managed to get a print of my left foot twice instead of a left and a right. Apparently, upon seeing the prints, my father became extremely distressed and literally ripped the blanket off me to make sure I didn't actually have 2 left feet. When my older sister was being born, my dad was in the room. He was so excited to watch that he screamed, "Honey, you gotta see this!" My mum said deadpan, "I'm a bit busy, can I get back to you, dear?" Kind of on topic, my mum said that when she woke up my dad to tell him her water broke, he jumped out of bed and started sweeping. She asked what the frick he was doing and he said, "I have to clean, the baby is coming." Just imagine what he's gonna think of these floors. Get out the fine china. According to my parents, I was a super fast delivery. Like so fast that the doctors and nurses had stepped out of the room to go to attend to someone else, and my mum grabbed my dad and told him to get ready to catch me. My dad didn't even have time to put on gloves and had to catch me, baby gunk and all. Apparently he smiled, passed me to the nurses, who came rushing in, kissed my mum on the lips, then leaned over and vommed everywhere. In conclusion, baby gunk and spew. Medical professional here. We were trying to get mum to push for at least 10 seconds with each attempt at getting baby out. So I'm counting down from 10 and ask the dad to join in just as baby's head appears. 10, 9, 7, 4, 7, 3. The guy was so excited and nervous and caught in the moment that he forgot how to count. One of the most precious moments I've gotten to be a part of. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My mum wanted to deliver me naturally, but there were complications. My head was way too big. My mum was still trying to push when the doctor realized he would have to perform an emergency C-section. Apparently, they put the bars up on the side of my mum's bed, rushed her out of the room at full speed, and turned the lights off, leaving my dad stranded alone in a hospital room by himself. He said he didn't know what to do, so he just sat down, still in the dark, and waited for someone to get him. A little over an hour later, a nurse came in to prepare the room, found my dad, and brought him down to the nursery to see me. I laughed so hard just thinking about my father sitting alone, in the dark, in a random room in a hospital while I was being born. My father's son is a very well-educated, well-spoken man. He was with me in the hospital room when I gave birth, and the first thing he said after seeing our son the first time was, "Oh my God, look at his balls! They are huge on a newborn. Now I'm curious, but I don't want to search for baby balls."
Oh, here you go, attached pictures and hyperlink, for educational purposes. Wait, NSA, Prism, frick!
Well, you took one for the team there, pal. My mum went into labor late in the evening. My dad was asleep, he had to work early. She went in and said, "The baby is coming, get up." He replied, "Calm down, it's fine, go have a cold bath." So she had my grandma take her to the hospital. In my dad's defense, if he sleeps as heavily as me, he probably wasn't even awake for this. My biological father was out drinking while I was born. My mum's best friend and the man I consider my father was there the whole time and used to tell me all the time how I could fit in one of his hands. Each time he told me, he looked teary-eyed. I'm curious as to whether this was a small or premature baby, or whether the fine father figure in question was in fact an enormous giant, or whether he was rocking gloves like Uncle Jack from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I was born on Father's Day. Haha, funny story. My dad got tennis rackets and tennis balls as a Father's Day gift, so he was playing with them in the basement, hitting balls against the wall when my mum went into labor. So she yelled at him from the top of the stairs that the baby was coming, and my dad, he says, "Okay, dear, I'll be down here playing tennis." She was livid. I was born in the 80s and my dad was in the operating room. I have a few older brothers who are all born naturally, but bro number 3 did some damage on the way out, so I was born via scheduled C-section, something my parents weren't really used to. My parents didn't know the gender of their new baby, me, ahead of time, so it was going to be a surprise. The surgeon put his hand in my mum's abdomen to reach for me and yelled to the room, "It's a girl," before getting me out. My dad was so excited, he just blurted out, "How can you tell?" And the surgeon looked at him with a sarcastic face and said, "She's wearing earrings." When my dad was born, my grandpa wasn't even there. He was asleep in the lobby of the hospital. The doctor had to go and find him to tell him he was a father. When he came into the delivery room and the doctor showed him my dad, he only had one thing to say.
I thought they were supposed to be cute.
My dad always said I looked like an undercooked lizard. It was a Sunday and my mum was in labor with me. The doctor comes in and asks, "How's it going?" Mum?
"Oh, I'm feeling…"
"Oh no, the football game. The Bears are playing and how's it going?" My dad? "Up by 7. I was delivered by C-section, but apparently my mum's contractions were so intense that while she was holding my dad's hand, she squeezed so tight that she broke it. Mind you, my dad is 6'4" with huge hands and my mum is only about 5'5". The day I was born, my dad took me down every hall in the hospital and showed me off to everyone who would look. "Look how beautiful my little girl is." My mum said he was gone with me for over an hour.
That is just the sweetest thing. Put a big grin on my face. "Look at this beautiful thing that I made."
"All by myself." Well, me and my wife, we get to keep it. I was in the OR assisting with a C-section. Dad was there and he passed out and crapped himself. I thought that was pretty fantastic. My dad likes to tell the story of my birth over and over. They knew I would be born early. At 6 months, the doctors realized they couldn't keep me in any longer. They warned my dad that I wouldn't cry because I was so premature. Not only did I come out mad as hell, but I screamed my little head off too. They told my dad that at 2 pounds I only had a 5% chance of survival. 1973, mind you. I proved them wrong on all counts. My dad broke his back a few days before my mum went into labor with my brother. He was still in the hospital recovering from surgery, not able to walk around yet. My mum went into labor in the same hospital, and my dad demanded for a large enough room for 2 beds and that they wheel his butt down to her room so he could be with her. So my dad was laying in a hospital bed with a broken back right next to my mum when she had my brother. Thankfully not the one that I personally saw, but when my younger cousin was born, they had someone who was still training in the room observing and whatnot. Well, after the birth, she was in charge of taking care of the placenta. It dropped out of her hands and splattered all over the floor. My uncle was so disgusted by it that he fainted. For the birth of my oldest brother, my dad was holding my mum's hand. After he was born, my mum noticed he was still rubbing his hand. She asked him why he was rubbing it, and my dad said, "Well, he was squeezing my hand pretty hard." My mum asks, "Why didn't you tell me I was hurting you?" Dad says, "Well, I figured you were probably in more pain than I was." They've been married for 31 years and they both endured 4 more childbirths. Oh, my dad started freaking out so much when I was born that he stole my mum's oxygen mask for himself. The doctor started yelling at him about how the baby, me, needed the oxygen and had to steal it away from him. An older resident once told me the story about how he was working in New York City in his youth. There was a blizzard and a guy couldn't get his wife to the hospital in time. She gave birth at home and they brought them in to check up on the baby and mother. The dude is obviously in shock from the delivery and keeps saying, "I told him," the baby, "to stay in there. I told him to stay. Not an hour old and he's already stopped listening to me." Cracks me up every time he tells it. I'm just getting a hilarious mental image of this guy screaming, "Stop! Stop!" at his wife's hoo-ha. When I was younger and mad at my parents, I told them that I hoped I was switched at birth because there was no way I could be related to them. My mum said that wasn't possible because my dad literally never let go of me when I was in the hospital. He stayed with me the whole time because he was afraid someone would try to switch their crappy baby with his awesome baby. When my brother was born, his head was like a lemon being shoved out of a birth canal. My dad looked at him, then asked the doctor if his head was going to stay like that. He also wrote my name wrong on the birth certificate. I love my dad. When my sister was born in the 80s, my dad was ill-prepared for what newborns sometimes look like when they come out. Newborn skulls are kinda squishy, so when my sister got squeezed out, her head got a little squished and came out kind of conehead-like. In the delivery room, my dad smiled and said she was beautiful. Then he immediately exited, started crying, and called his friend Mike, a doctor, and said, "I don't know, man, there's something wrong with her. She came out looking like a frickin' hammerhead shark." His buddy had to convince him nothing was wrong and the head would go back to normal. Apparently he kept saying, "But she looks like a fricking hammerhead," over and over again. Dad here. My second child was born with bright, shiny red hair. Neither me nor her mum have red hair. There were about 10 or 15 assorted doctors, interns, nurses, etc. in the room. One of the interns sees the hair and immediately asks, "So, does red hair run in your family?" Every medical professional in the room sucks in a breath. They knew the dangers of asking such a question, probably from previous births. I looked the intern in the eye and said, "Yes, hers and mine." Everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief and immediately went back to what they were doing. Had I been quicker on my feet, I would have said something to the effect of, "No, wait, frick, I knew it," and stormed out while everyone glared evilly at the intern. It would have taught him a lesson. My mum loves to tell the story about my older brother, parents' firstborn kid, being born. They got to the hospital around 2 a.m. and after the initial examination, the doctor said it was going to be a while still and disappeared. An hour or so later, the nurse says it's getting to be time, so she goes to find the doctor and she can't. He's not answering pages or anything. There was a trash can at the foot of the bed, and my dad started freaking out, yelling about his first kid is going to be born straight into a trash can and what a horrible start to life that is. Another nurse calmed him down just in time for the doctor to show up yawning. He'd fallen asleep somewhere and nothing was waking him up. I worked in the local EMS system for about 6 years. In that time, I've become acquainted with a lot of the floor staff. Before my son was born, we arrived at the L&D unit and I was greeted by the staff warmly and excitedly. They made sure that both my then wife and I were treated with the best of care. Fast forward to 40 hours later. She had been in labor for 36 of them. I have not slept at all in that time frame, nor have I eaten. I was too nervous to leave her side, worried that I would miss the birth of my first child. The moment arrives, she's crowning. I'm there holding her hand and being comforting as I can when it hits me like a sack of bricks. Holy crap, you're about to have a kid. You, the irresponsible paramedic. You're about to be responsible for another human being. That played on repeat in my head. As my gorgeous son is delivered, the combination of exhaustion, stress, and hunger took me out. I remember the nurses say, "Wow, he looks really pale. Oh crap!" Then a whiteout and a thud. I waked up to the ED staff and some of my fellow EMS crews and L&D staff standing over me. To this day, I have not yet lived down that I, a 6'1", 300-pound ex-rugby player paramedic, was knocked out by a newborn who was 21 inches long, weighing 7 pounds 11 ounces. I love that story. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.